When my rich uncle bet on me $200,000, it set the family on fire and revealed secrets better left buried. I was a black sheep who pulled himself up by his bootstraps. I'm Noah, 27 years old. I'm the kind of guy who spent his entire life on the "why can't you be more like" side of family conversations. No college degree, no fancy job, just me in my one-bedroom apartment, making ends meet with a customer service gig and waiting for something to finally change. At least, that's the way it used to be. My family? Well, let's just say they're not exactly supportive types. My older brother, Ryan, is 32 and as put together as they come. Fancy job, beautiful wife, 2 kids, and a house with a yard. Then there's my cousin, Oliver, 30, who's what my family considers ambitious. He's the business bro, always talking about stock options, networking, and leveraging opportunities. He and Ryan both have a habit of treating me like some underachieving sideshow, someone to be pitted or avoided at family gatherings. And then there's Uncle Ben. Ben's about 65, my mom's older brother. He's the rich one, the one who's always dropping in from some tropical vacation or calling in from a conference overseas. Growing up, he was almost mythical. I remember hearing about his business deals, his big house upstate, and his constant revolving door of women. My mom, Alice, who's 58 now, has always had this weird love-hate thing going on with him. She claims he's selfish and reckless, yet anytime he shows up, she can't help but get drawn into his stories, that spark of admiration hiding beneath her judgment. And me? He always just called me the dreamer. Not exactly a compliment in my family. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, I got a call that set this whole thing in motion. Out of nowhere, Uncle Ben invites me out for lunch. He didn't tell me why, just said he was back in town and wanted to catch up. I half expected him to cancel last minute, but sure enough, he showed up, right on time, dressed like he walked off the set of a Wall Street reboot. We met at this steakhouse, the kind of place with dim lighting and menus that don't show prices. The whole thing felt surreal. Here I was, looking around at businessmen in their pressed suits, trying to remember which fork to use first. Ben sat across from me, calm as ever, a smirk on his face as if he already knew I'd be uncomfortable. After we ordered, he got right to the point. "I've been keeping an eye on you, Noah," he said, leaning back, "and I think you're in need of a push." I raised an eyebrow, completely thrown off. "A push?" "Yeah," he continued, swirling his whiskey. "Look, you're a smart kid. You've just drifted. I don't blame you. This family isn't exactly known for nurturing its own." I almost laughed at that. He wasn't wrong. My whole life, I'd been pegged as the black sheep, the guy who couldn't get his act together. It wasn't for lack of trying, but no matter what I did, I never seemed to meet my family's standards. "So what? You think you can change that?" I asked, half joking. Ben shrugged. "I think you've got potential, Noah. You just haven't had the opportunity to prove it. And that's what I'm here for." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "How would you like to start your own business?" I almost choked on my drink. A business? Me? I tried to shake off the shock, but I could feel my face heating up. I wasn't exactly the entrepreneurial type, or at least, no one had ever told me I was. "I don't know, man," I said, feeling a mix of excitement and skepticism. "This sounds intense." Ben just laughed, the kind of deep, hearty laugh that only comes from years of confidence. "Everything worth doing is intense, Noah. You have ideas. I know you do. All I'm offering is a chance to see where those ideas could go with the right backing." He paused, sizing me up. "Look, I'll invest $200,000. Enough to get you started on something you're passionate about. It's not a handout, it's a bet on you." I was speechless. The thought of that much money at my disposal felt like a dream. $200,000? That could change everything. I could get out of my dead-end job, finally do something I actually cared about. But why me? "Why are you doing this, though?" I asked, skeptical. "You've got a whole family of people who'd kill for an offer like this." Ben's expression changed, just for a second. There was something deeper there, something unsaid. "Let's just say I believe in second chances," he replied. "Besides, I've made my share of mistakes. Maybe this is a chance for me to fix one." I didn't know what he meant by that, but before I could push further, He took out a pen and a piece of paper. Think about it, Noah. I'm not expecting an answer today. Just consider it. We left the restaurant after that, Ben giving me a hearty pat on the back as he walked to his black Audi, leaving me on the curb, reeling from what had just happened. It felt like a fever dream. A $200,000 bet on me? The family's black sheep? I had no idea how to process it. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I was excited. This was a chance to finally do something that mattered, to prove everyone wrong. But there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the questions clawing at the back of my mind. Why me? What did Uncle Ben really want? When I mentioned it to my mom, her reaction wasn't exactly reassuring. Noah, honey, she sighed, a trace of worry in her eyes. Ben's money. It doesn't come without strings. What strings? I asked, frustrated. Her face tightened, the way it always did when she didn't want to say more. Just be careful, she said, finally. Your uncle's done things he's not proud of. I pressed her for details, but she clammed up, leaving me more curious than ever. Uncle Ben had always been the golden boy, the successful one. What secrets could he possibly be hiding? As if to add fuel to the fire, Ryan and Oliver started calling me more than they ever had before. Ryan wanted to meet up to talk about plans, and Oliver kept hinting that I should think about the family if I was going to accept Ben's offer. Their sudden interest didn't feel right. They'd spent years dismissing me, and now they wanted in on my decisions? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about proving something, to them, to myself, maybe even to Ben. If he was willing to take a chance on me, maybe I owed it to myself to take a chance too. Finally, after days of pacing around my tiny apartment and running the numbers, I made my decision. I called Uncle Ben and told him I was in. There was a long pause, and then he chuckled, a low, satisfied sound. Good choice, Noah. Now, let's get to work. Little did I know, that phone call was about to kick off a chain of events I never could have predicted, setting my family on edge and unearthing secrets that were better left buried. Taking Uncle Ben's money felt like opening a door to a whole new world. Within days, I went from clocking in at my miserable customer service job to sketching out ideas for my very own business. I decided on a niche tech startup, something I'd always daydreamed about but never thought I'd have the means to pursue. It was surreal. My entire life, I'd been told to get serious and be realistic. Now, I had the funds to actually do it. Uncle Ben didn't just throw money at me and walk away. He set up regular check-ins, offering business advice that, begrudgingly, I had to admit was incredibly useful. But the money changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't long before my family started circling around, their interest in me suddenly skyrocketing. Ryan, my older brother, was the first to make his move. He called me up, casually asking if I wanted to grab a beer. Normally, Ryan only ever contacted me for two reasons: family holidays or to offer unsolicited advice about how I could improve my life. But now, he seemed friendly. So, how's it going with Uncle Ben's investment? He asked, as soon as we sat down. I shrugged, keeping it vague. It's good. I'm working on some ideas. Ryan leaned in, his expression shifting from polite interest to something more calculating. You know, Noah, I've been thinking a lot about it. If you need any help managing the money or setting things up, I could pitch in. I looked at him, trying to figure out what angle he was working. Ryan had a stable job in finance and, as far as I knew, was doing just fine. But here he was, acting like he suddenly cared about my business. Thanks, Ryan, but I've got it under control, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't pleased. Just remember, Noah, he said, smiling in that patronizing way he had. Business is a family thing. You should think about the long term, you know? Not just yourself. The whole thing fell off, and it didn't end there. My cousin Oliver, the self-styled business guru, reached out next. He invited me over to his place to celebrate the new venture, as he put it. I went, partly out of curiosity and partly because I didn't want to seem rude. Oliver's apartment was just as I remembered it. Sleek, minimalist, with nothing out of place. It screamed, I'm too busy for real life. So, you've got big plans, huh? Oliver asked, pouring us both glasses of some expensive-looking whiskey. That's great. Really? Ben's putting his faith in you. But if you want to make the most of that money, it's all about smart investments. I could help with that. I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. I appreciate it, Oliver, but I think I can manage. He gave me a sharp look. Look, Noah, you're new to this. I'm not saying you can't do it alone, but Ben's got expectations. And this family, well, we're not in the habit of letting people go off and do whatever they want with family money. Family money. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't family money. It was Uncle Ben's money. But apparently, that didn't matter to Oliver. To him, and apparently to Ryan. Any money in the family was fair game. I went home that night feeling both frustrated and, frankly, a little paranoid. My family hadn't cared much about what I did for years. Now, suddenly, I was everyone's favorite relative. I tried to shake it off as I dove into my project, but it didn't end there. Over the next week, my mom started dropping by unexpectedly, bringing up Uncle Ben's generous investment in a way that felt less like support and more like suspicion. Noah, honey, she said one evening as she sat on my couch, sipping tea she'd insisted on making herself, I just want to make sure you know what you're getting into with your uncle. I rolled my eyes, feeling the familiar prickle of frustration. Mom, I'm 27. I think I can handle it. She gave me that look, the one that managed to be both disappointed and worried. It's just, Ben isn't like you, Noah. He's been through a lot, made a lot of choices that haven't always been clean. I asked, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze fixed on her tea. Ben's business ventures, they weren't all legitimate, if you know what I mean. He's been involved in things that most people would consider risky. I tried to pry more details out of her, but she clammed up, muttering that it wasn't her place to say. Still, her words lingered. What had Ben done to make his fortune? And why was she bringing this up now, after all these years? The more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. I was working with Uncle Ben's money, setting up a future for myself, and suddenly, my family seemed hell-bent on reminding me that I owed them something. It was suffocating, like they didn't want me to succeed without them. Then, out of nowhere, I started getting these cryptic messages. They were from an unknown number, short and unsettling. The first one simply read, Asterisk, money changes people. Family isn't immune. Asterisk. I dismissed it as a prank at first, but the messages kept coming. Asterisk, watch your back, Noah. Success has its cost. Asterisk or. Asterisk, trust is a luxury in your world now. Asterisk. I tried blocking the number, but new ones would pop up, the messages continuing. They felt like warnings, vague enough to unsettle me without giving anything concrete. And every time, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting for me to fail. The final straw came when Ryan and Oliver showed up at my apartment together, unannounced. I opened the door to find them standing there, looking like two polished wolves. Hey, little brother, Ryan said, his smile as tight as ever. Oliver and I thought it was time for a family chat. I sighed, stepping aside to let them in, bracing myself for whatever advice they'd come to give. They sat down, not waiting for an invitation. Noah, we've been talking, Oliver started, crossing his legs and leaning forward with that patronizing smirk. We think it'd be smart for you to consider some additional guidance. Uncle Ben's investment, it's a lot to manage alone. Guidance? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or control? Oliver's smirk faded slightly, but he didn't back down. You don't have to be defensive. We just want to help. You're new to this world, and we're family. Ryan chimed in, his tone carefully measured. Think of it as a partnership. You have Ben's money, and we have the experience. Together, we could make sure this is a win for everyone. I looked between the two of them, feeling my jaw clench. They weren't here to help me. They were here to take a slice of what they saw as family money. They didn't believe in me or my project. They just wanted to ride my coattails. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I appreciate the offer, but this is something I need to do on my own. I don't need a partnership. Ryan's face darkened. You don't know what you're getting into, Noah. You're sitting on an opportunity that people would kill for. Don't think we're going to let you waste it. There it was. The threat, barely veiled, as if I was just some kid throwing away a family treasure. I stood up, pointing to the door. I think you should both leave. Now. Oliver looked like he wanted to argue, but Ryan grabbed his arm, muttering something under his breath. They got up, throwing me one last glare before walking out. As the door shut, I felt a strange combination of relief and fear. My family, the people who were supposed to support me, were treating me like an obstacle, and I didn't even know why. The messages, the warnings, my mom's vague comments, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't put together. Uncle Ben had given me a chance to finally prove myself, to break free from the labels my family had thrown on me my entire life. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that this opportunity was as much a trap as it was a blessing. And somehow, I knew the worst was still to come. Things had gotten weird, to say the least. After Ryan and Oliver's little visit, I threw myself into work, hoping that maybe, just maybe, focusing on my startup would make the family chaos fade into the background. But I couldn't shake that nagging feeling, like I'd just woken up in the middle of a storm, with no clue which way the wind was blowing. Uncle Ben's calls became more frequent. He wanted updates on my progress, which was fair. He'd given me a huge opportunity, after all. But there was a new tone to his voice now, a hint of urgency that hadn't been there before. I told him about my business plans, the early steps I'd taken, and he seemed satisfied enough. But then, one night, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. Noah, has your mother mentioned anything about my past? The question hung in the air, and I wasn't sure how to respond. My mom had hinted at something, sure, but she'd been vague. She's mentioned that maybe some of your business dealings were a little risky. Ben laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Risky. That's one way to put it. He hesitated, then let out a sigh. There's a lot you don't know about this family, Noah. Secrets that we've all agreed to keep buried. For good reasons. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The way he said it, like there were skeletons in our family closet just waiting to be found. What kind of secrets? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused. Let's just say, some of my wealth didn't come through the most traditional means. I did what I had to do to get where I am. And not everyone agreed with my choices. I didn't know what to say. This was the man who had always been the family's success story, the self-made millionaire. I'd assumed he'd made his money through clever business deals or investments, but the way he talked about it, it sounded like he was admitting to something darker. Is that why my mom and the others are so suspicious of you? I ventured. Another laugh, this one softer, almost sad. Suspicious is putting it lightly. They think I'm a criminal. Maybe I am. But if you're looking for saints in this family, Noah, you're going to be disappointed. We all have our sins. Before I could press for more details, he quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to my startup, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb on me. By the time we hung up, I was left with 1,000 questions and no answers. The cryptic texts kept coming. Every day, another vague warning about trust, money, and family. It was starting to get under my skin. I was tempted to ignore it, but something told me that these messages weren't random. They felt personal, like someone knew exactly what I was going through and wanted me to be scared. One morning, I woke up to a new text from that same unknown number, and this one sent a chill through me. Asterisk, not all money is clean, Noah. Remember who you're dealing with. Asterisk. I sat there, staring at the screen. Could this be about Uncle Ben's shady past? Or was it something more? I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was texting me knew more about my family than I did. And that was terrifying. I decided it was time to get some answers. I called my mom, hoping she'd finally give me something concrete. After some small talk, I asked her outright, Mom, what's the deal with Uncle Ben? Why does everyone act like he's the devil himself? There was a long pause, and I could practically hear her biting her lip on the other end of the line. Noah, honey, Ben did things back in the day. Things that hurt this family. He was reckless, always chasing money, never thinking about the consequences. What kind of things? She sighed. There was an incident years ago when you were just a kid. Ben was involved in a big business deal that went south, and it nearly ruined your father and me. He swore he'd make it right, but it was too late. We almost lost everything. I felt a pang of anger. And you never told me? Because it's in the past, she snapped. We moved on. But that's why we worry about you, Noah. We don't want you getting caught up in Ben's world. We don't want you making the same mistakes he did. I hung up, feeling like I'd just been handed half a puzzle. My family had hidden this part of our history from me, leaving me in the dark while they all whispered behind closed doors. No wonder they saw me as some naive fool. They'd kept me out of their secrets, out of the very history that had shaped them. That night, I did something I'd never imagined doing. I started digging into my family's past. It was harder than I thought. There weren't exactly news articles on family secrets, but after a few hours of searching, I found something, a lawsuit from about 20 years ago. It was against Ben and a few of his business partners, alleging that they'd engaged in fraudulent investment practices. The details were murky, but it looked like some people had lost a lot of money. Some had even lost their businesses. As I read through the documents, it became clear that Ben hadn't just been a ruthless businessman. He crossed lines, used people, and destroyed lives to build his fortune. My stomach churned. This was the man who'd given me $200,000 and called it an investment in my future. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the realization that confronting Ben might only deepen the rift between me and the rest of my family. But one thing was certain. My family wasn't what I thought it was. And neither was Uncle Ben. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. I needed answers, and I was done with the half-truths and whispers. My mom was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up, surprised to see me. Noah, honey, what are you doing here? I didn't bother with pleasantries. Tell me the truth about Uncle Ben. I know about the lawsuit. I know he ruined people's lives. And I know he almost ruined ours. My mom's face went pale. She put down her coffee, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. Noah, it's complicated. Your uncle, he's always been a risk-taker. He wanted to get ahead, and he didn't care who got hurt along the way. Why did you let him back into our lives then? I demanded. Why didn't you keep him away? Because he's family, she said, her voice trembling. And family forgives, even if it hurts. Besides, he's helped us out a lot since then, made sure we never had to worry about money again. He made up for it in his own way. Made up for it? I laughed bitterly. So you forgive him, but now you're mad at me for taking his help? For trying to make something of myself? She sighed, reaching out to touch my arm. It's not the same, Noah. You're not like him. You're a good person. You don't need to sell your soul to get ahead. I pulled my arm away, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. So you'd rather I stay at the bottom, struggling, just to avoid selling my soul? Maybe I don't want to be the family charity case anymore. She looked at me, hurt, but I didn't care. I was done with the guilt, the secrecy, the double standards. If Uncle Ben was my way out, then so be it. Maybe I'd turn out like him. Maybe I'd make mistakes. But at least I'd be doing something, instead of living my life under their judgment. When I got home, I found a new message on my phone. This one was different. Asterisk, you've seen the cracks. Dig deeper. Asterisk. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. It was like someone was guiding me, pushing me to uncover the truths my family wanted to keep hidden. But who? And why? As I sat there, the pieces started to fall into place. The resentment from Ryan, Oliver's insistence on a partnership, my mom's fear of me turning into another version of Ben. They weren't just worried about me. They were scared. Scared that if I succeeded, it would force them to face the parts of themselves they'd buried. I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to be the family's scapegoat any longer. If they wanted to keep their secrets, fine, but I'd carve my own path, with or without their approval. And as for Uncle Ben, maybe I'd confront him eventually. But for now, I had my own plans to focus on, and I wasn't about to let anyone stop me. Uncle Ben's money gave me the freedom I'd always wanted, but the cost of that freedom was starting to feel heavier every day. My mom's fears, the lawsuit I'd uncovered, the strange warnings, it all hung over me like a dark cloud. But if I'd learned anything from Ben, it was to keep moving forward, no matter what. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove everyone wrong, to show that I could succeed on my own terms. Yet, the more I progressed, the more complicated everything became. My startup was finally taking shape. I'd managed to build a small team, rented an office space, and even had some early interest from potential investors. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right track. But with every success came new pressures. Uncle Ben seemed pleased with my progress, yet every time we talked, I could sense an edge in his tone, a silent expectation that I couldn't quite decipher. One day, Ben called me in for a meeting at his office. The place was intimidating, a massive skyscraper downtown, all glass and steel. As I walked into his corner office, with its sweeping views of the city, I felt a pang of inadequacy. This was his kingdom, built on the very risks and shortcuts my family had warned me about. And here I was, trying to build something of my own in the shadow of his empire. He gestured for me to sit, his face unreadable. "You've been making progress, Noah," he began, his voice calm. "I'm impressed." I tried to hide my surprise. "Thanks, Ben. I'm doing my best." He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. "But I have to ask, are you ready for what's coming?" "Coming?" I echoed, frowning. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "Success brings scrutiny, Noah. People are going to start asking questions. About your past. About your family. About me." I shifted uncomfortably. "I don't see why my past or family would be an issue. I'm running a legitimate business." Ben's smile faded. "It's not always about what's true, Noah. It's about perception. And perception can be manipulated." He paused, watching my reaction. "I've been through this before. People will come out of the woodwork, digging up anything they can to bring you down." I swallowed, feeling a surge of anxiety. "Are you saying I should be worried?" "I'm saying you need to be prepared," he replied, his voice low. "Your family won't protect you, and neither will your team if things go south. You're on your own out here." I left his office feeling like I'd just been handed a loaded gun with no idea how to use it. Ben's warning echoed in my head, stirring up memories of the cryptic texts and the old lawsuit I'd uncovered. Was someone already watching me, waiting for me to slip up? Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, an article about my startup appeared in a local business magazine. At first, I was thrilled. It was my first real media coverage, a sign that people were taking notice. But the article was a hatchet job. It wasn't just about my startup. It was about me, about my family. The reporter had dredged up everything, from my high school suspension to the rumor that Ben's money had come from dubious sources. The article hinted at family drama and unresolved legal issues, painting me as some kind of spoiled rich kid riding on dirty money. Reading it felt like being punched in the gut. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Texts and calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking if the rumors were true. The worst part? My mom called, furious. "Do you see what you've done?" she hissed, not even bothering with a greeting. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You've dragged us all into this mess." I tried to defend myself, but she wouldn't listen. She kept going, accusing me of being reckless, of betraying the family. By the time she hung up, I was left standing there, staring at my reflection in the screen, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was right. A few days later, another bomb dropped. A lawyer's office contacted me, informing me that I was being added to an old lawsuit against Ben's former business associates. Apparently, someone thought my association with him made me liable too. I couldn't believe it. I'd barely started my own business, and now I was being dragged into his past mistakes. I called Ben, panicking. He picked up on the first ring, his voice calm and collected. "Noah, take a breath. This is just noise. People will come after you because they think you're vulnerable." "Vulnerable?" I asked, incredulous. "This isn't noise, Ben. They're saying I'm part of your old scams, that I'm involved in whatever you did to get rich." He let out a sigh, almost like he was bored. "You have two choices, Noah. You can let them scare you into giving up, or you can push back. Show them that you're not just some pawn in their game." "Push back?" I repeated, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "How exactly am I supposed to do that?" "Get a lawyer. Handle this like a businessman, not a scared kid. And remember, This is just the beginning. The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. The call left me reeling. Ben's version of support was cold, clinical, but he was right. I had to fight back, if only to protect my own future. I hired a lawyer, and they reassured me that the lawsuit was baseless, more of a scare tactic than an actual threat. But still, the damage was done. Word got out, and people started whispering. Investors who'd once been interested in my startup started pulling back, wary of the controversy surrounding me and Ben. Ryan and Oliver saw the perfect opportunity to swoop in. Ryan showed up at my apartment one evening, acting like the whole scandal was a personal betrayal. "I warned you, Noah," he said, pacing my living room. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. But no, you had to go off and do things your way." Oliver, who'd tagged along, chimed in. "Maybe it's time to reconsider our offer, Noah. We could help you navigate this mess, clean up your image." I glared at them both, barely able to contain my anger. Clean up my image? Are you kidding? You guys don't want to help me. You just want to control me. You're not here for me. You're here for yourselves. Ryan scoffed. "Look around, Noah. Everyone's already written you off as a fraud. Uncle Ben's money has poisoned everything you touch, and you're too blind to see it." Oliver added, "We're your family. We're the only ones who actually have your back." "Yeah, right," I shot back, my voice rising. "You didn't care about me until I got Ben's money. You don't want to help. You want a piece of it." Ryan and Oliver left after that, but their words stuck with me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was naive to think I could build a clean reputation with Ben's money hanging over me. Every step forward felt like it was being overshadowed by his past. I knew I had one choice left: confront Ben. I needed to hear it from him, needed to know if he'd really drag me into a legacy I'd never asked for. When I arrived at his office, Ben was waiting, leaning back in his chair with that same smug smile. "I figured you'd come around," he said, not looking the least bit surprised. "Did you know this would happen?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Did you know that getting involved with you would ruin my reputation? That it would turn my family against me?" Ben didn't flinch. "Your family was against you long before I got involved, Noah. I just gave you the chance to prove them wrong. If you can't handle a little pressure, maybe you were never meant to succeed." "A little pressure?" I echoed, disbelief flooding my voice. "This isn't pressure. This is sabotage. People are saying I'm a fraud, that I'm part of your scams." "Let them talk," he interrupted, his voice as cold as ice. "If you want to succeed, you'll have to learn to ignore the noise. Or are you going to let a few rumors scare you off?" I felt a wave of anger. He didn't care about me. I was just another investment, another pawn in his game. And now that I was in too deep, he was watching to see if I'd sink or swim. But as I looked at him, I realized something. Ben was alone. All his money, all his success. It hadn't bought him loyalty, love, or family. He had power, yes, but it had come at a cost. And he'd been trying to pull me into that same lonely world, where family and integrity were just obstacles to be managed. I stood up, my heart pounding. "I'm done, Ben. I'll pay you back, every cent, even if it takes my whole life. But I'm done being your pawn." He didn't try to stop me. He just watched me with that same unreadable smile, like he'd known all along that this was how it would end. As I walked out of his office, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe I didn't have the money or the connections to make this easy, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to succeed, and I was going to do it on my terms. Whatever it took, I would prove them all wrong. My family, Uncle Ben, and anyone else who thought they could control my fate. This was my life, and I was taking it back. Leaving Uncle Ben's office was like stepping out from under a dark cloud that had followed me my entire life. I'd spent years seeing him as a legend, a self-made millionaire, respected and feared. But the man I just confronted wasn't some success story. He was a lonely, ruthless figure who'd built his wealth by controlling everyone around him, including his family. Walking away from him felt like escaping a trap, but I knew it came with a cost. Without Ben's investment, my business was hanging by a thread. I had to let go of half my team, which hurt worse than I'd expected. The ones who stayed weren't in it for the money. They stayed because they believed in the vision we'd built together, even if it was shaky. Their loyalty kept me going, reminding me why I was doing this in the first place. I wanted to prove to myself, to my team, and to anyone watching that I didn't need Ben's money to succeed. But cutting ties with Ben didn't erase the legal problems. The lawsuit that had hung over us for weeks hadn't vanished. In fact, things got more intense. My lawyer spent hours trying to separate my startup from Ben's mess, but the damage was done. Ben's reputation followed me like a shadow, and investors who'd once shown interest started backing out, citing risk as their reason. People who'd been excited about my startup now saw it as just another part of Ben's tainted legacy. My family's reactions were just as harsh. When I told my mom that I'd broken away from Ben, I expected her to be relieved. But she didn't hide her frustration. "Noah, I don't know why you had to make things so difficult," she said, exasperated. "We warned you about Ben. Now you've dragged yourself into his world, and there's no way out." "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to contain my frustration. "You think I wanted to be involved in his world? That's why I walked away." She sighed. Her voice softened. "I just don't want you to end up like him. I don't know if you realize what it means to be truly on your own." Her words stung. It was like no matter what I did, I couldn't win her approval. I'd walked away from Ben, chosen my own path, but to her, it was just another mistake. A few days later, Ryan and Oliver showed up at my apartment. They weren't there to offer sympathy. They wanted to make sure I knew exactly how they felt. "We heard about you and Ben," Ryan started, his voice full of disapproval. "You've made things harder than they needed to be." I bristled. "What do you mean?" Ryan exchanged a look with Oliver before continuing. "You're in over your head, Noah. Walking away from Ben was reckless. Now you're on your own, and you don't have the resources to keep this going." Oliver nodded. "We don't want to see you go down, Noah. This isn't just about you. It's about the family. We could help, but you need to trust us." I laughed bitterly. "Trust you? You just want to keep me under control, like I'm some problem that needs managing." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You're so naive. This isn't about control. You're family, and we're trying to save you from yourself. Ben's reputation affects all of us. If you were so concerned, why didn't you help me when I first started? Why wait until I walked away from Ben?" Oliver stepped forward, looking at me like he pitied me. "We wanted you to find your footing, but it's clear you're in over your head." "I'm not interested," I replied firmly. "I'd rather struggle on my own than succeed on someone else's terms." After they left, I felt strangely calm. Their opinions no longer mattered to me. I didn't need their approval or their version of help. For years, I'd let my family define me, but now, I knew that their judgment had no power over me. With Ben's influence gone, I had to make do with what I had left. I moved the business into a cramped, shared office space, trading a sleek view for a small desk and mismatched chairs. Every dollar we earned, every client we landed, felt like a step toward proving I didn't need Ben's money or my family's validation. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from a venture capitalist group. They'd heard about my startup, and instead of being deterred by my decision to break from Ben, they were intrigued. They respected my choice to go independent, saying it showed integrity. After a few meetings, they offered a small investment. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to keep us going, and more importantly, it was clean money. With renewed determination, I threw myself into the work. My team rallied around this new start, grinding through each day with a sense of purpose. Every win, a new client, positive feedback, another investor willing to take a chance, brought us closer to something real. It wasn't glamorous, but every success felt earned. The real test came at a family gathering a few months later. My mom invited me, saying it would be good for everyone. I almost didn't go, but in the end, I realized that avoiding them would only prove them right. So I went, determined to show them I was standing on my own. Dinner was tense, full of polite small talk that felt like it could crack any minute. Ryan was the one who finally broke the silence. "So, Noah, I hear you're still running that startup," he said, his tone condescending. "Must be rough without Uncle Ben's support." I smiled, refusing to take the bait. "It's tough, but at least I know everything I'm building is mine." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Is that really worth it? You could have had an easier path." I shrugged. "Maybe, But I'd rather own my success than owe it to someone else's money. The room went quiet after that. My mom looked between us, trying to keep the peace, but I could tell Ryan and Oliver were taken aback. They weren't used to me standing up for myself. For them, I'd always been the family screw-up, the black sheep. But I'd come to realize they didn't understand what real independence was, and they probably never would. The months that followed were challenging, but the business grew, slowly but surely. Every challenge was a reminder that I was building something on my own terms. Each success was a victory, earned without Ben's influence or my family's control. Looking back, I realized how much I'd been shaped by my family's judgments, by their fears of me turning out like Ben. I'd spent years thinking I needed to prove myself to them, but now I knew that wasn't true. I didn't need their approval. All I needed was my own determination and the courage to keep going. One evening, as I stood in my small office, looking out over the city, I felt a deep sense of peace. My path hadn't been easy, and I knew it wouldn't get easier overnight, but I was finally living on my own terms. I was no longer the family's black sheep. I was just Noah, a man who'd chosen his own way, no matter what it cost. And that, I realized, was worth more than any fortune.